Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to have you here today. Today, we'll be exploring the topic of understanding social divisions. This is a crucial subject that touches on how societies are structured and what influences social relationships. Over the course of this presentation, we'll look at what social divisions are, why they matter, and how they impact our daily lives. So let's get started and dive into this important topic together. Now, let's move on to the next part of our discussion, which is the range of outcomes. Here, we're exploring how different social divisions can lead to a variety of results and experiences for individuals and groups. We'll look at how these differences can sometimes overlap or intersect, creating complex social landscapes. For example, race, class, and ethnicity often cross paths, shaping people's opportunities and challenges in unique ways. We'll also examine the differences, similarities, and divisions that exist across societies, understanding where they align and where they diverge. This helps us see patterns and commonalities amid diversity. Next, we'll touch on some real-world examples, like a story from the Mexico Olympics, which illustrates how social identities can influence participation and representation on a global stage. We'll then consider the politics of social divisions, where political systems and policies often reflect or reinforce these social distinctions. Recognizing this helps us understand power dynamics and potential avenues for social change. Moving forward, we'll review the 3 determinants that shape social divisions. These might include factors like economic status, cultural identity, and historical context. We'll also look at how multicultural countries manage and navigate a mosaic of social differences, emphasizing inclusion and integration. Then, we'll sum up with a conclusion, tying together how understanding these outcomes helps us foster more equitable societies. Finally, we'll acknowledge the thank you at the end, a moment to appreciate your engagement and encourage further reflection on these important themes. Language and region are certainly important, but they're not the only features that give people a distinct identity. Sometimes, people also identify themselves and connect with others based on things like their physical appearance, their social class, their religion, their gender, caste, tribe, and other factors. These aspects shape how we see ourselves and how we relate to those around us. This concept is what we call social identity. It highlights that our sense of who we are is not just about where we come from or what language we speak, but also about these various social markers. When we talk about identity, it's essential to understand that it's a complex and multifaceted thing. It influences our behavior, our relationships, and even our opportunities in life. Recognizing the different features that contribute to social identity helps us appreciate diversity and the ways people relate to one another in society. So, in the bigger picture, understanding social identity is key to understanding human behavior and social cohesion. It reminds us that our identities are layered and interconnected, and that respecting this complexity is crucial for building inclusive communities. This slide shows a powerful moment in the history of the civil rights movement in the United States. The image captures an iconic scene at the Mexico Olympics, where 2 athletes, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, made a bold statement. They are standing with their fists clenched and raised in the air, heads bowed during the playing of the American national anthem. These men are African American and had just won their medals, Tommy Smith the gold and John Carlos the bronze. What makes this moment so significant is their choice to wear black socks and no shoes, which symbolized Black poverty and the struggle for equality. This act of protest was not just about their athletic achievements, but was a powerful gesture calling attention to racial injustice and inequality in America. This event is a landmark because it exemplifies how athletes can use their platform to stand up for civil rights and inspire change. It's a reminder that sports and social activism are often intertwined, and that moments like these can resonate far beyond the competition itself, encouraging dialogue and progress. With this gesture, they aim to draw international attention to the ongoing issue of racial discrimination in the United States. The black-gloved and clenched fists raised in the air became a powerful symbol of Black power and solidarity. It's important to note that Peter Norman, the white Australian athlete who won the silver medal, also played a significant role by wearing a human rights badge on his shirt during the medal ceremony. This was a clear sign of support for the two American athletes and their cause. However, the International Olympic Association viewed their actions as a violation of the Olympic spirit because they made a political statement. As a result, Carlos and Smith had their medals taken away, and they faced widespread criticism. Norman, for his support, was excluded from the Australian team for the next Olympics. Despite these repercussions, their actions succeeded in capturing global attention for the civil rights movements in the U.S. Their protest highlighted the broader fight against racial injustice and showcased how sports can be a platform for social change. This moment reminds us of the power of individual action to influence international awareness and spark important conversations. Now, let's look at the idea that not every social difference leads to division. Sometimes, social differences actually bring people together, even if they seem very different at first glance. For example, members of the same religion might still feel disconnected because they belong to different castes or sects. Similarly, in a family, the rich and the poor might not have close relationships simply because they see themselves as very different. This highlights an important point. We can have multiple identities and belong to more than one social group at the same time. Our identities can change depending on the context we're in. So, while social differences can sometimes create divisions, they can also serve as a bridge that unites diverse groups of people. This is a key part of understanding social unity and division, showing us that social differences are complex. They can both divide and unite us. Social diversity can take many different forms depending on the society we look at. These differences are often shaped by something quite simple, which is the accident of birth. For example, some people might practice a religion different from the one they were born into, simply because they made a choice later in life. But a lot of our social differences come from the choices we make ourselves. Most of us decide what to study, what kind of job we want to pursue, and even what games or cultural activities we want to participate in. These choices help us form social groups that are based on our interests and preferences. So, when we talk about the origins of social diversities, it's important to see that they are not just about what we happen to be born into, but also about the choices we make. These differences, similarities, and divisions shape our societies in unique ways, highlighting both the diversity and the commonalities that exist among us. This understanding is key to seeing how social groups are formed and how they influence the fabric of our communities. Social division occurs when different social differences overlap or intersect with each other. For example, in our country, Dalits often tend to be poor and landless, which are economic disadvantages. At the same time, they frequently face discrimination and injustice based on their social identity. These kinds of situations create clear social divisions because they reinforce differences between groups. It's also important to understand that groups sharing a common interest on one issue might find themselves on opposite sides when it comes to other issues. This overlap and cross-cutting of differences makes social divisions complex, but also interconnected. Recognizing these overlaps helps us see how various social factors shape the way society is divided and how people relate to each other. This understanding is essential as we explore the broader theme of social cohesion and conflict. Both Northern Ireland and the Netherlands are predominantly Christian countries, but they have quite different patterns when it comes to how religion and social class interact. In Northern Ireland, religion and class are closely linked. If you're Catholic, you're more likely to be in a lower social class, and this group has a history of facing discrimination. This overlap between religion and class has really shaped social dynamics there. In contrast, in the Netherlands, the relationship is less straightforward. Religion and class tend to cut across each other, meaning that being Catholic or Protestant doesn't necessarily predict your economic status. Catholics and Protestants are about equally likely to be rich or poor, which shows a different social pattern compared to Northern Ireland. This comparison highlights how the same religious identities can have very different social implications depending on the country. It also ties back to our overall theme of how religion influences social structures and inequalities across different contexts. So, what we're seeing here is that Catholics and Protestants have experienced conflicts in Northern Ireland, whereas in the Netherlands, such conflicts are much less common. This difference is largely due to how social differences overlap in each context. When social divisions align closely, say, along religious or ethnic lines, they create deep social cleavages that can lead to tension and even conflict. But when these social differences cut across each other, creating what we call crossing or overlapping divisions, they tend to be easier to manage. These kinds of divisions can actually promote more social cohesion because they prevent any one group from becoming too isolated or polarized. So, the key takeaway here is that the way social differences intersect plays a crucial role in either fueling or easing social tensions. This concept ties into our larger theme of understanding how social structures influence conflict and cooperation within societies. Social divisions of one kind or another exist in most countries. Even countries like Sweden and Germany, which were once quite homogeneous, are now experiencing rapid change. This change is largely due to the influx of people from different parts of the world. These migrants bring their own cultures with them and often form their own social communities within the larger society. As a result, most countries around the globe are now multicultural. This diversity can enrich societies in many ways, but it also presents challenges in terms of integration and social cohesion. Throughout this presentation, we've seen how understanding and managing these social dynamics is crucial for building inclusive communities. The combination of politics and social divisions is very dangerous and explosive. Democracy, at its core, involves competition among various political parties. This competition is healthy in many ways, but it can also have a downside. It tends to divide society because political parties often appeal to different groups with distinct interests and identities. Now, if these political parties start competing based on existing social divisions, say, along ethnic, religious, or class lines, it can escalate those divisions into full-blown political conflicts. This can be especially risky because it may turn social differences into political battles, making society more fragmented and vulnerable. And in the worst cases, this kind of division can lead to conflict, violence, or even the disintegration of a country. So, while democracy encourages healthy competition, we must be cautious about how political struggles interact with social divisions, because the stakes are incredibly high. So, for many years, Northern Ireland was actually a site of intense, often violent, ethno-political conflict. The population is mainly divided into two major Christian groups. About 53% are Protestants, and around 44% are Roman Catholics. These divisions aren't just religious, they're deeply political as well. The Catholics generally supported nationalist parties, which called for Northern Ireland to be unified with the Republic of Ireland, a predominantly Catholic country. On the other side, the Protestants were represented by Unionists, who wanted Northern Ireland to stay part of the United Kingdom. When we think about the range of outcomes in such a divided society, it's important to recognize how complex and sensitive these issues are. The conflict wasn't just about religion, but also about identity, sovereignty, and political allegiance. Understanding this helps us see why the situation was so volatile for so long, and it also highlights the importance of finding peaceful and inclusive solutions in such divided communities. In 1998, the UK government and the nationalists finally reached a peace treaty, and as a result, the nationalists suspended their armed struggle. This was a significant milestone because it showed that even long-standing conflicts can sometimes find peaceful solutions. However, the story was quite different in Yugoslavia. Instead of peace, the conflicts along religious and ethnic lines led to the country's disintegration into 6 independent nations. This highlights how political competition rooted in social divisions can sometimes have devastating consequences. Some people interpret these examples to mean that politics and social divisions should never be mixed. The idea is that if social divisions exist within a country, they should not be expressed or exploited through politics, because that can lead to fragmentation and chaos. Ultimately, these cases remind us of the importance of managing social divisions carefully and of working towards peaceful coexistence, especially in diverse societies. Now, let's look at the 3 factors that are crucial in determining the outcome of politics involving social divisions. First and foremost, it all depends on how people perceive their identities. If individuals see their identities as singular and exclusive, it becomes very difficult to find common ground or accommodate different groups. On the other hand, if people view their identities as multiple and complementary to the national identity, it creates a more inclusive environment. For example, in Belgium, most people now feel that they are just as much Belgian as they are Dutch or German-speaking. This shared sense of multiple identities helps them stay united. Similarly, in our country, many people see themselves as Indian first, but also as part of a particular state, language group, social community, or religious community. This layered sense of identity plays a vital role in how social divisions are managed and politics unfold. Now, moving on to the second point. It actually depends a lot on how political leaders choose to raise the demands of their communities. When leaders present demands that are within the constitutional framework and don't harm or oppose other communities, it's much easier to find a way to accommodate those. But, in the case of Yugoslavia, things were different. The leaders of different ethnic groups framed their demands in such a way that they couldn't all be satisfied within a single country. This created significant challenges for unity and stability. So, the way demands are raised really influences whether they can be peacefully integrated or if they contribute to conflict. So, the third factor really hinges on how the government responds to the demands of various groups within the society. If the rulers are open to sharing power and are willing to address the reasonable demands of minority communities, it can significantly reduce social divisions and make the country more stable. When authorities take inclusive steps, it helps to build trust and cohesion. On the other hand, if the government tries to force integration without considering the diverse needs and voices, it can actually backfire. Such forced attempts often plant the seeds of disintegration, creating more resentment and division over time. So overall, the way governments handle these demands can either help unify the country or contribute to its fragmentation. It's a crucial point in understanding how social cohesion can be maintained or lost. So, as we wrap up, I want to emphasize that recognizing and accepting social diversities in a country shouldn't be seen as something dangerous. In fact, when different social groups express their identities and interests through politics, it often leads to a balancing act where opposing divisions cancel each other out. This process actually reduces tensions and helps strengthen our democracy. Throughout history, we've seen that democracy is really the best way for groups to fight for recognition, and at the same time, find ways to live together peacefully despite their differences. So, embracing diversity within a democratic framework isn't just ideal. It's a practical approach to building a more inclusive and resilient society. This idea ties back to our overall theme, that democracy thrives when it respects and manages social differences thoughtfully and openly.